one of the things you just raised is, one of the things that popped into my head from what you were saying is if we're more flexible, what does that mean for advanced education beyond traditional college? And of course, this has been discussed for a long time at various management schools. Is the MBA still relevant? And I'm sure it's discussed in a lot of other graduate schools. Certain technical schools, medical school, law school, it's still relevant. You're still going to have to do it. But other areas, it's kind of a question. And I didn't think much of that 20 years ago. Well, sure, the MBA is useful. But as fast as we're going now, I am starting to question that. Now, of course, all the management schools around the country are going to say, "Oh, Pruneau is nuts," But when I talk to family about my son, and what would I tell him as he goes into college? Gee, should I go on to graduate school? If you ask me today, my answer is I'm not so sure. You can move a lot faster, and if I had not gone to graduate school and just gone straight out into the workforce and maybe taken some executive MBA classes, just the ones that I needed, which are accounting, maybe a little bit of marketing strategy or business planning, just a few of those courses rather than a full 2 years of your life, things might have been a little bit different. Now, I definitely needed it back then, but I'm talking about relevance for today. And so I think what you're saying is if our degrees, especially technical ones, are potentially outdated the day we graduate, what's it all for? And I think some students ask this. Of course, the traditional liberal education, and I mean that from an academic sense, not a political sense, that, of course, is definitely relevant, and I think just like it's been relevant for hundreds of years, will continue to be. But anyway, I think it really raises the question that if we're learning all the time and we're learning these new technical skills, do we really want to get them from a long, 1 year, 2 year traditional program?
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons. I think a lot of the more agile universities, and I'm thinking of online type of universities, American Intercontinental University, AIU, Phoenix, and some of the others, are starting to realize this and move quickly to create things like specialized MBAs and customized MBAs. And I think part of the logic of still behind the persistence of the MBA is that it's not that, as much as maybe school people that sell us the degree might disagree necessarily. I think that most businesses would say it's not the skills that you learn as an MBA, it's the culture that you're inculcated into. It's the attitude. The problem with that is that culture is still essentially the conservative culture that by the time you learn it has already changed in the coming economy. In other words, unless you can learn agility itself and learn that unless the MBA becomes a training ground where each semester they throw a completely different environment at you and say, remember the project you were working on? All right, we're killing that, and we're going to shift in midstream because there's this new technology that's the new trend. Unless they keep teaching you that premise and that principle and that responsiveness, then I don't even think the cultural value is strong enough to merit getting an MBA. But I like where I think contract work suggests that we'll go. The old adage is, you got to have enough experience. If you don't have a degree, you have to have enough experience to prove what you can do. And yet, how do you get experience if you don't have the degree to get in, et cetera, et cetera? But I think the idea of what you're talking about, taking the classes that you need, setting up contracts with companies, and demonstrating the ability to complete projects, to help companies reach goals. I think that's the currency much more than the diploma. I think it's much more powerful to say, gee, you know, I helped this company roll out a new software program to 500 North American hotels, than it is, gee, I have a degree that tells me that I could do that.
Well, this is definitely going to be a consequence of contracting. So the demand for four-year degrees and advanced degrees comes from employers, right? It's that social requirement. And remember earlier in the conversation we were talking about where does flexibility come from? It comes from the lack of social structure. It comes from not so much peer pressure to do certain things that may be ritualistic and not necessarily productive. And I think there is a big aspect of the MBA and other degrees that are somewhat ritualistic. If you want to come to work at our firm, you really need to have X. And sometimes it's not just X, but from a specific type of college or a specific group of colleges. So that's somewhat inflexible, but for decades and decades, you know, that was the only way to get in. But how does that conversation work in the contracting world? People really don't care what your background is. What they want to know is, can you do for me, for this particular job, what I need to do? And what are your reviews in the past? So it totally erases the thing about college and degrees and where do you come from, because it's much more to the point of a straight value exchange. And this, I think, is what's going to squeeze colleges and advanced degree programs, is because remember we talked about that mix of permanent employees, that sort of hypothetical 50,000 employee company. Yes, right now, if they've got a roster of 50,000 permanently employed people, the entrance for some of those jobs might be certain ritualistic things like a college degree. But if you drop that to just 25,000, and 25,000 of them are contractors, I suspect the conversation is going to be about how many people have reviewed you in the past, what have you done in the past, let me see your portfolio, am I sure that you can do what I need to do? Great. Come on in and let's get it done. And notice in that conversation, it doesn't really get into all the things that we interview for a permanent job, which is more about your personal background and where did you go to school, where do you come from, are you going to join the family, how's it going to go with us? So once that's free and once the mix of employment changes, we drop some of that the sort of entry ticket type thing. Now that does raise the question of relevance for certain advanced degrees. But of course the mix will change first, and then I think the question of advanced degrees come into play.